Hey, everybody. Pastor Shay here. And I am so glad that you've joined us once again for Pause with a Pastor. And here's the thing. We've gone live, and just before we went live, Matt asked Ardo a question. Matt, I want you to repeat that question for everybody. And this is something we need to discuss. Really, really important.
Yeah, Scott, I was just wondering, do you have a bunny rabbit?
Well, I do have a bunny rabbit. Her name is Mabel, and it got dropped off at her doorstep by my son Johnny and his wife Katie, because Johnny gave Katie a bunny rabbit. But Katie told him at one time, I like bunny rabbits, but I just don't like albino bunny rabbits with red eyes. And sure enough, Johnny must have not been checked into that conversation, and he bought her for her birthday a white bunny rabbit with red eyes that now has been turned over to us. And so I am taking care of the bunny rabbit, Mabel the bunny. So free facts for you right there, ladies and gentlemen.
I mean, this is just raw information, the information that the people need. Okay. I did not know until 20 seconds ago that Scott has a bunny rabbit named Mabel. Which is absolutely incredible to me.
Hey, the Central Valley will kill those things. I just want you to know.
They could shoot that thing. Tell Johnny.
Can we move on from this topic? I'm cutting this off.
I'm just saying the heat
Some
alone.
government agency cuts us off.
The heat alone.
So,
the heat alone.
You guys, I'm going to have to pastor all of you. We've got to move on. This is Pause with a Pastor. Obviously, the Pastors of Grace Church of the Valley. It's good to have you men here. And I think people are watching who I'm calling the baby Zoomers or the Zoomer generation. So I'm glad to have all of you here watching with us. Demo, he didn't want us to throw Johnny under the bus for his faulty bunny rabbit buying skills, which it's the first time I've ever used that sentence before. But moving to a lighter note, not to throw anybody under the bus, but Pastor Scott, we need to talk about something as well that's kind of on the lighter end of things. We got to talk about your GIF game.
Yes.
GIF game. So this is important. We have been the beneficiaries of Pastor Scott's ability to send animated GIFs, which, by the way, for the baby Zoomers, they're called GIFs, not GIFs, but they're GIFs. And Scott, this is like an untapped talent. It's impressive. What happened?
Savvy technology. I've learned from the best by Shay Cam Thomason.
Cheers. And
I send those to my family now, and they want to know where I get them. And I just tell them I have an arsenal at my disposal.
Dwight Schrute shows up more than anyone else from what I've seen.
Wait, never mind. We've got to move on because I'm going to get distracted by that topic alone. Demo, are you a GIFer? Any GIFs coming out of your pocket?
Very, very few and far between.
Oh, okay. Matthew?
What does a GIF stand for, Shay?
I forget.
Generated images.
Image.
Shay, I don't know what a GIF is, but I know what a GIF is.
Oh, that's it. You're going in the waiting room.
Yeah, penalty box.
He's out.
He's the first one in the penalty box for the day.
I was going to kick him out of the chat. But all right.
It's like
all
the
right,
word gift minus the T.
I'm moving on. I want to talk about haircuts, but there's no time. I do also want to talk about masked worship leaders. Also, no time for that.
No.
Need to move on to things that are more exciting and more happy than that. Which, Blake, if you end up wearing a mask as a worship leader, you'll be like the Masked Singer, like that TV show, right?
It's like a beard covering.
I think you might have to wear one of those anyway.
Yeah. Well, we are an essential service, so.
Hey, Blake, can you please get the Dodger background dialed up for you?
Yeah,
just
for
for a
sure.
moment.
Yeah.
Just with your hat, it just would be a vintage day.
Ladies and gentlemen, I just want everybody to know that we've lost our minds. And
No. That was last week. Last week we've lost our minds. This week we haven't ever done that before.
yeah, so let's try it. Yeah, that's the new That's
This is getting bad.
welcome to March 58th. We've got to keep going. But hey, I had the joy and privilege of interviewing John Paul and Sarah Stepanian on Sunday night live from Uganda, which was so fun. Did anybody have an opportunity to catch any of that?
Yeah, just
We
a
did.
little. Yep.
Okay. Yes, well, first of all, they had an upgrade there in Uganda, so the internet was working pretty good.
Yeah.
There was two things I was praying for that interview. One, that the internet would work, and two, that it wouldn't rain, because John Paul said they would have to take a rain check because the rain comes down so hard on the tin roofs that I wouldn't even be able to hear them
Wow.
if it was raining. So we had both of those things work out well, but such a sweet time just talking with them about missions and really thinking about missions as a young person. So I was kind of gearing that towards high school students. So if you haven't checked that out, go to our YouTube channel, our Facebook, whatever, please check it out. But one highlight, and I told this to the guys earlier, one highlight from that time was I asked Sarah, and you can go towards the end of the interview when I asked her this. I said, Sarah, what's been the hardest, or actually just asked both of them, what's been the hardest thing since you guys moved? And Sarah, kind of without missing a beat, said, oh, for sure, just trying to stay alive. And I was like, whoa, and she was not talking about coronavirus. She was just talking about everyday life in Africa. So snakes, malaria, bugs, shopping, all those things. But anyway, I think you should go watch that and check it out. A really, really fun conversation with them. They're just a blessing and a joy. Yeah. But fellas, we got to get to some questions. Blake, hard for me to take you seriously right now being in Dodger Stadium, but glad. And Scott, are you going to take a nap back there? Are you?
Oh, no, I'm good. Just
Okay.
study office.
People want to know. It's just, everybody has a bunk bed in their office these days. Okay. So church is online these days. And I guess that's kind of my question. Is church the same? Can we replicate church? And what are we really trying to do with these kinds of things? So, there's some questions here. We have a little document that I'm using, but what is the goal of helping our people? How do we seek to do church online versus, helping someone do household worship? And I bring that up because my wife, Bethany, she sent me this. I'm going to pull it up on my phone so I don't miss it. She sent me a little conversation by two kind of bigger names, Mark Dever and Ligon Duncan, a conversation I think they were having on Twitter, where Mark Dever asked Ligon Duncan whether his church, or the church that he was preaching for just last Sunday, if they were gathering together in person. And Ligon Duncan's response, he said, no, like all the rest, we're under the stay-at-home measures. And he said this: we ministers can only now help our people in their family worship until congregational worship may be safely resumed. Let me say that again. He says, we ministers can only now help our people in their family worship until congregational worship may be safely resumed. Okay. What do you guys think? True, false, needs some finessing? Is that what we're doing? Are we just trying to help people do family worship, or are we really trying to do church online? Talk to me. The word. Ooh, we really are pausing with a pastor here.
Awesome.
A hush falls over the crowd.
Well, I'm afraid that once I start talking, then I'm not going to stop. So I want to measure my response.
Can't you mute him? Can you mute him?
That's
I
true.
can kick him out anytime I want to.
If I find myself in the waiting room, I'll know you either didn't like what I said or I went too long.
Yep.
So I think it's a great conversation to have, because I personally have found myself really torn in what I think are my personal, what I think are biblical ideals for what the church is and what the gathered church is. So, you guys know, I'm maybe more on the end of, I'm opposed to certain things that are common in the American church. So for instance, I'm opposed to satellite churches, multi-campus. I'm even personally opposed to multi-service, practicing that within the church. So, that puts me kind of having a lot of appreciation for some of Mark Dever's, the reason for Mark Dever's concern to not do anything. I have a lot of sympathy for that concern.
So wait, just pause right there for a second. Just to clarify, Mark Dever's church, if I understand this, currently has not been meeting,
Right.
both physically or digitally.
Right.
Yes.
And some of what's driving that is that what happens in a worship service is intended to be a physical gathering. That's actually the nature of the church. So if all you did was ever stay home and watch something online, that's not actually church. And I mean, I think a lot of really good arguments and things that we should think through when it comes to the church being a church gathered for worship. So for instance, if we were just open up the door to like, yeah, church can be online, that's no problem, then who are pastors responsible to shepherd? Is it absolutely anybody who can have technology access? I now am responsible to shepherd the flock of God that is among me all across the world because anyone in the world can access my information. Is that what a shepherd is? What about the authority of an elder? Does that mean I now have authority over, people that are spread across all kinds of different geographies? What about the aspects of fellowship? What about the one another? So even the commands in the church to love one another, I think in a lot of ways it's easy to say, yeah, I love the universal church, but the rubber meets the road when you say actually love somebody in the local church. And that's where we really find out if we do love with a personal, intentional, we're willing to put up with wrongs against us. The messiness of relationships happens in the local church. So I guess what I'm saying is the church gathered in a local context is how we even see a distinction between the universal church, which is all Christians of everywhere at all times, and our particular church. And part of that is represented in a physical gathering, right? And so I'm very committed to the physical gathering as part of what makes us, particularly Grace Church of the Valley. So we have elders, we have a doctrinal statement, we have people that have covenanted together to be a church, and we gather together. So I'm very committed to the gather together idea, which makes me sympathetic to Dever. And it kind of has pained me to be doing what we've been doing because it hasn't felt ideal. On the other hand, when I first heard about that tweet, I guess at the same time, it pains me to hear kind of Ligon's perspective because he's trying to guard that same, no, this isn't exactly the same as church. But when you say that what we're doing in terms of preaching and singing is just for family worship, there's an opposite danger that I feel like is on that side of the coin, which is, kind of moving even in like the family integrated worship style or like some of the stuff that Voddie Baucham says that the church is just a family of families that I would also disagree with. I think the family is a different institution than the church. These aren't one and the same.
Yeah.
Right. So the church has different authority than the family. The church has different members than a family. The church even has a slightly different mission than just a family, right? So families are responsible for a whole variety of things that we're not responsible for as a church, right? When it comes to even raising children. So when you say like all we're doing is helping families worship, I'm concerned that our church services actually get morphed into all we do is stuff that helps the family, when that's not even particularly the intent of a corporate worship service. Is just for, oh, we're just doing family worship. We're helping you out, dads and moms, by doing this worship in front of you. No, the corporate service is distinct from your family worship time. So I don't like it that Ligon's perspective seems to erase some of the distinction between corporate worship and family worship. It almost is like confused the two a little bit. On the other hand, I don't love it that we're saying we're doing church when we're not actually gathered. So I'm torn, but I'm just not sure I love saying, yeah, we're just doing family worship, when really there's something very different in terms of corporate worship that we're after. So there you go. I guess I'm discontent with both sides of yeah, we're not going to have any services, or yeah, all we're doing is helping families worship together.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Other thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I just jump in. I don't, I was trying to think about the one another's today. You can't do the one another's by proxy. Those happen in a relationship. Obviously, sometimes you can pray for one another and not be connected to them, but those one another's are to be put into action and into relationship predominantly. And so I think we're trying to arrive at a balance between let the church be the church. We want to help people by way of technology. But I think all of us as pastors and even our body, we just can't wait to be back together again. I mean, I think even when you look at the fact, when I've been studying Ephesians 1:4, just as he chose us in him before the foundation of the world, he chose us out, but he placed us into a local body. And I think technology is helpful. Obviously, we're doing some of these things at this time, but the design of that, maybe even back to what David said, the design of corporate worship is to be together as a body, putting those one another's into practice, gathering, if you will, to edify, scattering to evangelize. But the mode we're in now can never meet the deepest need of an individual. And I think we know that as a staff and are trying to help our people with that.
Yeah, I'll jump in for 1 second on this. I've thought about this, not so much in relation to doing church online. I have thought about that. I've done a lot of reading, thinking about like digital connections, but it might've been Cal Newport. It's either in his book, Digital Minimalism or Deep Work, but I appreciate his thought on this. And he's an unbeliever talking about just digital connections, how they are just, we feel connected, but it's not the same as a real relationship. Right. Yeah. So it has like the appearance, almost the shadow of feeling connected. It's like, oh, that's great. And I'm connected to that person, when really I haven't seen, like, for instance, I'll just give an example just from today. A friend, actually a mutual friend of Scott and I, he's a pastor. He's sick right now. We've been praying for him, but I saw that his wife posted a video on Facebook thanking people. And I'm like, oh, it's so good to hear from her, you know, and I feel this relational connection. But that's not the same as me being able to go and pray with them, right? Or to minister to them in a physical way. And they're really, it's hard because it is the appearance of connection at times. Again, I think the illustration I'm using is a shadow, but it's not the substance. And so I'm affirming, I think, both of you in that, like, I don't think any of us love this current situation by any means. I don't know a pastor who does. But yeah, I mean, we can take that, even taking away coronavirus, taking away the distance that we have right now, even just bring that to the individual level. We think, oh, I'll connect with him on Instagram. And it's like we're still in a relationship. And I still kind of go, I don't think so. Right. Like, that's not the same as me being with you, seeing what's going on with you and seeing how you're doing. I'll say this and I'll let other guys talk. I just saw a friend from college just the other day. Well, I guess it was, I don't know, probably 5 weeks ago now. And I hadn't seen him in a long time, and we had been connected digitally, but it's not the same, right? When I get with him and we start sharing like stories and we start hearing his hurts and his joys and those kinds of things, and being able to read body language like that is so much different. And I don't know how to put words to it.
Even when we and Demo was there, when we were there with that precious family last week at the hospital, regarding the preciousness of their son, unless you're there in that instance, right?
Yeah.
You could miss the very thing you're talking about but when you're there shepherding a family like that, that can only happen person to person, can it? And in the context of a relationship with each other, it's just so different, isn't it? Anything other than that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's this weird balance of, I'm thankful to be able to connect this way.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't have the same substance. And I don't like when people try to replace it that way. I think that it is the same personally. But Blake, Matt, anything to add?
Yeah, I think when you say doing church, I think you got to be careful. Even what, I think we all understand what we're saying, but doing church isn't just what happens on Sunday. We would all agree with that. And
Correct.
So, Sunday is a specific time. It's a worship service. It's geared around and it's formed around the preaching of God's word. The music that we sing, and specifically with our church, we are very big on congregational singing is the goal, right? So we're not feeding a lot of energy into putting on a show. And so even to do something like what we're doing these days is so counter our church, because we're not trying to put on a show for people, and yet what we're trying to do right now in the time that we're in is to help people that can't be together right now. So we wouldn't say this is our normal form of worship service. We wouldn't ever want to replace that. And yet if we can do music online that helps a family or helps somebody in their home sing and respond to who God is and what he's done, we're still going to do that. Are we going to take communion without the church being gathered? No. Are we going to baptize people without the church being gathered? No, we're not going to do those things without being with one another. And yet, I feel like as our mission, even what we've formed as a mission as the church, as a local church, that we exist to glorify God, right? So we can still glorify God. Can we exalt the Savior? Yes, we can still exalt the Savior. Can we equip the saints? I think that's why Demo is doing his class on Wednesdays. And, tonight the ladies are getting together and Shay is reaching out to our students, Scott, you're doing what you're doing. And even Tebow, like as we continue to develop, like we're still doing our mission, right? We're still trying to extend the kingdom and encourage our people to do that. But we would never say what we're doing online is replacing what we would do in a normal gathering together. And you look at, Shay, I don't know if you're seeing the comments.
Yeah.
The comments, right? People are like, we want to get back together. We want to get back together. And we're like,
so do we.
We want to get back together. It's not, we don't want to keep us apart. And yet this is a very unique, I can't remember who said it, but it's like a fasting time for our church. This is a horrible, painful time for us to be apart. And are we going to do this forever? No way, because we are the church.
Blake, have you responded to those multiple texts that want us to do a drive-in?
Even the drive-in church, and we've got churches that are close to us that brothers and sisters that are everybody's watching each other's churches right now.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got to say to one another, we appreciate the toil that everybody's in, right? The tension that everybody is in. But, at the same time, we have to make decisions that not only serve our church, but that also show love to the community that we are trying to extend the kingdom in.
Yeah.
And so even the response to right now, we are responding to obey the government. And that's where the elders have landed. And so we are asking our people to understand that and to follow our leadership. Is that always going to be the case? I don't know. There might be a time where we need to revisit that, but right now we definitely feel like this is what we're called to do. So it's not easy. We don't love what we're doing. We don't love online worship and preaching only, right? Like we want to be back together.
Yeah.
But,
Amen.
I don't want to add anything to that, Blake, or Scott or Shay or Demo said. You guys, I agree. But the one thing that I think is almost humorous is to just think God is not surprised by this. God actually ordained this to happen. And so I just have to think that there's going to be good that comes out of it. And one thing is just even clarifying our ecclesiology, clarifying how we view church. And up to this point, there's been a lot of online multi-site, podcast sermons all week long. And I think if anything, the fast, so to speak, could produce a real hunger and appreciation and just love for that corporate gathering of the body. I think God's going to use this in the future to really get out of that mundane, routine Sunday morning event. For those of us who have lived through this, we're never going to forget this time when it wasn't a given that we can meet on a Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Matt, I have a personal question for you. I just want to know who's cutting your hair right now, because I'm going to need a trim here pretty soon. If that still is non-essential.
Yeah, my motorcycle on the way. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay. Hey, well, keeping it.
We're all like, who do you get to cut your hair around here these days?
I'm not.
Okay.
Actually, Blake's son Owen offered to cut my hair, which I was like, well, at this point, might as well. Hey, so keeping this discussion of the church, one of the questions that came our way was from someone in our church, just saying, how do we show our families, our individual families, that church is still important even though, we're doing what we're doing from home right now. So like on Sunday, I know my kids, they're going to spend, I think, 45 minutes to an hour with, or minutes a little less with Demo in the Seeds video that he's producing, and then we've got, corporate worship together on the live stream. So, how do we instill into our families that church is still really important in the midst of this?
I mean, I think one thing is just calling it what it is. So even saying like, this is not ideal, this is not what we want. I think personally, even as I've struggled through even dealing with, we're doing church digitally, I hope that there's some amount of growth or maturity to be able to say, I can work through something that isn't ideal and still implement it and not demand. I think that probably especially early on, even in my pastoral ministry here at Grace Church, my ideals were in a box that was like this big, and everything really, really needed to fit into that box really hard. Like this is the ideal for elders. It has to be, this is it. And everything had to be this nice, crisp, clean. And I'm not sure things are always that crisp and clean. So I'm not saying we have to care about theological precision. We have to care about how we think about what the church is and what it does. And yet at the same time, it's not ideologically perfect for us to be having online services right now. So be able to just say, I don't think this is ideal. This isn't perfectly what we would want it to be. But the reason we're doing this is because we still do care about the gathered church, and we don't want the church to be out of sight, out of mind. So even, I'd even give this to you all as just from my heart pastorally, certainly not laying down any sort of law, but for my family, we have chosen to always watch the service live, as opposed to watching a recording. Now, I know some of you are watching the recording and you can have reasons for that, but even that for us is a chance for us to say, other people at Grace Church of the Valley are gathering right now, all across the Valley. And there's people standing up in their living rooms, or there's people singing. Now people are bowing their heads and praying together. Now people are listening to the same message. Even that element of like, this is happening right now matters to me as a dad to say, this isn't just us on our own. We care about the church. So I really appreciate the live component of being able to do that. The second thing that we've done so just say, this isn't ideal, but here's what we're doing and why. Another thing that we've done is our family worship time. Right now, we're doing our family worship time after dinner, which is a change. We used to do it right before bed, but now we're doing it before dinner. And now on Fridays, we're doing what we call Church Day Friday. And every Friday, we talk through something about the church. So whether we're going to talk to the kids about why we give what we give, or how the church is organized, instead of our typical Bible reading time and that we would do together in family worship, we just spend a night talking about the church. So it's another way to be reminding the kids, this is what we value in our church. This is why things are the way they are in church. So those are just two things. Say out loud, this isn't ideal, but here's why the church matters. And then secondly, just trying to tell the kids, let's keep talking about church and what it is.
Mhm.
Other guys?
Oh, and I'm going to get some lights
Yeah.
turned on.
Yeah, no problem. He's going to clap. There you go.
I think
I mean, Demo, you mentioned this. There was last week or 2 weeks ago about, you were concerned about people not, forming bad habits. Like, and I'm probably with you on that. I like the consistency. I think even kids thrive off consistency. So, Sunday morning is church. And so, we've been trying to keep that very consistent, at least in our home, so affirming the watching it live. And as a church, I think everybody should know this. We've opted to continue to do live streaming services. We're at this point, we've only, I think, pre-recorded one thing, and that was the Sunrise Sing. Some of that was just logistical for the morning. But at this point, we're still coming here to stream that. So Scott can preach, so we can sing somewhat corporately. And so I definitely value that, on a personal level. But yeah, I don't know if you guys, other guys have things to add.
It's interesting. Obviously, my kids are a little older. I got one getting married here in 3 weeks. And, I look at this time, but if you've modeled that all the way in your life, then you've taught them, we have 7 kids, to love the local church. So, the habits now are important, but the habits now are what's carried over on what you've been doing year in, year out. And, I see my girls who are home from university continuing to love people and shepherd people almost daily, the relationships they have. So it would just be an encouragement on that question to make sure those are practices that are part of your everyday life, week in, week out, so that you begin to teach your children to love the local church because you're modeling that.
Yeah.
And I think there's ways to talk about that, show that example. And so that's important to have those kind of habits, even apart from this time.
Yeah.
Can I just share a quick story I just thought of? So Kathy and I were out for a walk in our neighborhood the other day. We got Luca in the stroller and we went down this one cul-de-sac. And as we were coming around the bend, I heard this kid voice yelling, Pastor David, Pastor David. And I looked and there was a group of kids there. They were on scooters and on bikes. And one of the kids that's in Seeds, I think he's somewhere around 5. He came running over and he said, hi. And Kathy always jokes that like I'm a celebrity anywhere between the ages of like 5 and 8. But anyway, so it was like, oh, hi, how you doing? And so we chatted for a little bit and then we said, all right, we'll see you later. And we started to walk away and I heard him again. He yelled, Pastor David, Pastor David. So I said, yeah, buddy, what? And he came running over and he said, I miss church. I miss church.
Yeah.
And so, I just leaned over and I just said, buddy, I miss church too. It's good for you to miss church. And I can't wait till we're back together again, So that's a family that value, here's a probably 5-year-old boy that says there's something I value. And so I miss that. Mm-hmm. So I think it's good for us to affirm that in our kids. Yeah, we do miss this. And we can't wait till we can get back to what we love. So.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, my kids just think we're liars. We told them we were moving to go to a new home and a new church and with new Pastor Scott. And so far, they've just been around the new home. And so I don't know, maybe they won't believe us from here on, but yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's the same Pastor Scott. He's just more one-dimensional at this point, just
exactly
here on the screen. Well, hey, so Demo, that little boy obviously says that to you. We agree. But then we miss church. But then we hear news reports, like I saw today, that our governor, is basically suggesting that he's not going to allow local officials to take any action at the moment to loosen, any restrictions that are put in place statewide. That was just like an hour ago on the LA Times. I saw this. And then you have just all the news, not just that, but just all the news that comes out every single day, and there's a question someone was asking, what about the real truth versus sometimes sensationalized, information that's there to create fear? Obviously, Pastor Scott, you've been preaching on anxiety, but like, how can we help people discern through that, what to watch out for, those kind of things? How do you guys, what kind of help can we offer?
I think something that comes to mind, it's kind of funny because I'm responding quickly, but I think one of the things I would say is don't be quick to believe what comes out right away, especially now, just because everything that's coming out is so fast and it's people are putting things up on the news to get attention, to pay the bills and to just draw conclusions really fast, to even respond as believers, whether it's online or with other people. We all have our opinions and preferences, but there are a lot of different preferences even within the church and within the community that we live, but even, with people that aren't in the body. And we have to be level-headed. We have to be, we're called to be joyful through trials. We're called to be wise and discerning. And I think that means that we don't respond just with a knee-jerk reaction, right? I think there's a time and a place to fight battles, but even that, you need to be ready to fight the battles that are worth fighting. So I would just say, don't be so quick to believe everything and react.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so just if I'm summarizing your thought on that, Blake, you have a little bit of hesitation, like you're not taking everything necessarily right at face value. You know what I mean? Like, obviously there's an element we want to trust journalists to a point, they're doing their best. We're trusting that, but there is just because of the rapidness of information.
Right. And every community, every county, every state, every country, right? They're going through so many different things. And so for us to just pop off about, I've got this opinion about this, and I've got this opinion about this. Well, you need to consider you're not the only person in the world, and your church isn't the only church in the world, and you're not the only, believe it or not. And at the same time, to recognize too, and I think it's where this is important for us and, whoever sees this, from our specific local church, like as elders, we are meeting, we are praying, we are continuing to talk and figure out how we are responding. And in a lot of ways, we are watching what the government's doing, and we are watching what's going on with our people. And it's not something that we're just going to sit back and just not react, but we're also going to we want to be wise, right? And that's the beauty of the plurality of elders.
I think we need to know our own hearts too, Shay. So as you think about like, how do I know, if I'm falling into the sensationalized side of the news or just getting information, like if you find your heart, which is your thinking and your feeling and your choosing, if your thoughts are constantly like swirling in your head of what about this and what about that and what about that factor, you've probably taken in too much information that isn't helping you. Part of the not having a spirit of fear, but of love, power, and a sound mind, there is an ability to think clearly that ought to come with our belief in the promises of God and the word of God. So our ability to think clearly, if your emotions are just frayed right now and you discover that, hey, the more I watch and fill in the blank, whatever your news show is, or whenever I read these articles, I find my heart's racing and emotionally I'm upset, whether it's I'm angry at, the government's not doing enough, or I'm angry because the government's overreaching and doing too much, or, if you start having all these emotional responses that are identified as sin, then you need to deal with that, right? So the outside circumstances of the news is having an undue influence on your heart that's supposed to be thinking, feeling, and choosing what God tells you to. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a way to evaluate if you're buying into the sensationalized stuff are you thinking and feeling and choosing what God tells you to? And then there's the second thing I'd say on that, and I think Scott wanted to weigh in, but I'll never forget some of the best preaching advice I ever got. It's from my wife, Kathy. Not saying I had great preaching professors too, right? But early on when I was preaching, this was in South Carolina, and I was preaching at a nursing home. Every Sunday we went to the same nursing home. Went to the same nursing home for 6 years, all through college, all through seminary in South Carolina. And so I'd preach, and I'll never forget the day we're in the car, and I'm looking for input, and I generally am feeling pretty good about my preaching, and so I'm looking for input from my wife, and she's going to be supportive, and it's going to be great. And so I'm like, hey babe, what do you think? And she's like, yeah, I just need to ask one question. I'm like, okay, shoot. And she said, so what? So what? Like, you said a whole bunch of stuff, but like, so what? Like, what's the point? Like, I need to be able to do something with everything that you said. And that has just been in my brain ever since. Well, so what? So I think you can apply that to you guys watching the news. So you're watching and hearing all these different things, but so what? What are you actually doing with that information? If all you're doing is just getting information to put yourself in more of a stew, is that really a helpful what? I mean, we need to know enough of the news to know what we're responsible to do and to care for our community. But if you're just overloading yourself with information, so what? What are you actually doing with all this information? Because you ought to evaluate why are you getting all this information? How is it actually benefiting your walk with Christ and your obedience to him? So ask yourself, so what, when you watch the news?
Scott, were you going to add something?
No, that sounds good. I think we're just trying to watch carefully. We're trying to be patient.
Yeah.
We're trying to balance the thought with either meeting together where some would want to do that and they're staging protests, but also knowing that we live in this world and that all the restaurants are closed down and all the malls are closed down. That's a concern, shutting down our entire community. But I don't feel like they're purposefully trying to persecute us in this situation. And I think you're beginning to see things open up, and I just can't wait till we're back together. And we want to be careful, as Blake said, to not be alarmist, and to be wise, and to be godly, and to share with people. All those things go on, don't they, within our own walk with the Lord and with our own conversations. So I think we're trying to be very, very wise and not be on either side of the extreme, where people have gathered, or the church in Riverside that did the drive-in church and got fined, and then another church did the drive-in and they weren't social distancing and they were in their own cars. And I think some people would say that's ridiculous because the abortion clinics are open, and is that an essential business? And so there's going to be rough spots here, but we just can't wait till we're back together. And I think that's everyone's heart. And I think our people at Grace Church of the Valley, I'm so thankful for them. Maybe as you saw in the questions coming up, they want to be together. I think when I'm in our community and when I'm with our people, they just miss being together.
Sure.
And yet at the same time, Shay, we've had a great response, haven't we? At least from what I'm doing, not what I'm doing, but what we're doing on the Lord's Day. We've been surprised how many people are tuned in. And so the ministry of the Word of God is going out, and we're grateful for that vehicle. So,
hey, so if I can just for a minute here, just take a tiny turn, and Matt, maybe I'll just look to you on this, just because we talked a little bit today, and you kind of mentioned you're trying to fight that desire to be complaining, to have a complaining attitude, or and so I mean, really, this is a question for all of you. How have you guys just personally been handling this and all of this? I have an answer, but Matt, I'm just curious. We didn't talk a ton about that, but you mentioned that to me today, and I don't mean to bring up a private conversation, but curious to know, how you're working through that.
Yeah, thanks for putting my private stuff out there, Shay.
Yeah, sorry.
No, but what I've been thinking about, Shay, is just how Paul says, do not grumble, do not complain. And I think actually where my mind's gone lately, I've been spending some time in the book of Philippians on my own and with a couple other guys working through it slowly. And Paul says, whether he had a lot or whether he had little, he learned the value of being content. And bear in mind, when he wrote Philippians, he was sitting in a jail cell and he had nothing at the time. And so I just think, there's a way in which we can relate to that even right now with our current circumstance, learning to be content, learning to accept the fact this is God's sovereignty. It's for our good. It's for his glory. And I was even just thinking about, guys, the last Sunday that I had in Montana was the last Sunday that they met. And it was the all-time low attendance for the past 20 years. And so even if we were going to just kind of say, hey, we're going to meet no matter what, we're going to just rebel against the government's rule, I think a lot of our own members would not be comfortable with that. And it would probably be a challenge even in and of itself. So again, what Blake said, I think we're just trying to do our best to obey the governing authorities, also to be safe though, and protect everyone. And so cultivating a heart of contentment and not complaining amidst that is where my own heart's going.
I think too, Shay, one of the things that's helped me as I'm preparing for the book of Ephesians is the whole section in there on Ephesians 5 on being filled with the Spirit. And then 5:20 says, giving thanks always for everything to God the Father in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. I really feel like it's important that as leaders, we choose joy over a grumbling, complaining spirit. And that begins in our own life and in our own home to choose that kind of joy. And I think obviously in the context, we've got to have the Spirit of God working in us and working the fruit of the Spirit in us so that we give thanks.
So I had come across in my own Bible reading this week, 2 Corinthians 4, and I found it, a similar thought, but just a reminder. I mean, again, like you guys, Matt, you had mentioned Paul sitting in prison there when he wrote to the church of Philippi, but 2 Corinthians 4, he's obviously talking about real suffering.
Mhm.
But he says this, we do not lose heart. Though our outer self is wasting away, our inner self is being renewed day by day. For this light,
Mm.
momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison.
Wow, it's
Of course, he
good.
goes on to say we look to the things that are unseen. And so I spent like, I don't know, a little bit of my afternoon the other day, just kind of like thinking about the contrasts, you know, that Paul gives, that Paul is sharing here. He's even talking about giving himself for the church. You know, he says, our death is working life in you. And he's constantly thinking about the death of Christ and how he can just continue to suffer for the sake of the church. And I thought, man, that puts things in perspective for my own heart, right?
Mm.
Like, this is really, really momentary and light. And I don't want to, you know, it's been hard. And obviously I don't personally have a friend that's dying of COVID-19. So I understand that. I want to be very, very careful what I'm saying there. For some, it's been a lot more intense, but for us right here, right now, like this hasn't personally been the hardest thing, even though there is elements that are hard, but I'm reminded from God's word, right, that we're continually being renewed through the power of the Spirit, which of course you see in Ephesians as well, right? In Ephesians 4. So anyway, that was good for my own soul to come.
Jay, you've got to finish the story. You were telling us a little bit today about Sarah as we opened the hour up that, what was the question again is,
What's the hardest thing?
and it's just living. Did you say living every day?
Yeah, trying to stay alive.
And not joking, meaning that with the elements, but finish the account there
Yeah.
that they went all the way to Uganda. And how did she finish that?
Yeah. So she said two things. One, she said they didn't really know that it would be that hard just physically until they got there. So they had obviously visited and seen it, but they didn't realize till they were living there. But then she said this, and if we do die here, that will be worth it for basically the cause of Christ.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that, I mean, she
We're
has that,
suffering.
yeah, right. She has that concern for her kids as a mom,
Yeah.
but she's also putting that into perspective under God's sovereignty. Like if that's God's will, then that's God's will. You know, and so I so appreciated that. Definitely go listen to that piece. But yeah, thanks, Scott. That's
a good
that
word.
was sweet time. Yep.
I give us a slightly different answer than what you guys have been saying, but still about, you know, processing things in our own hearts. And for me, 1 Timothy 1 and 2 has become something that I have been more convicted of. And it even showed up for the worship service on Sunday. So I did scripture reading and prayer, and it even showed up in my prayer just because I've become convicted by my failure to obey this passage. So 1 Timothy 2:1 says, first of all, then I urge that supplications, prayers, intercessions, and thanksgivings be made for all people, for kings and all who are in high positions, that we may lead a peaceful and quiet life, godly and dignified in every way. I just think I've been convicted because personally, I have gotten to the point where I'm really struggling with even like the decisions our government is making, the trustworthiness of our government. So probably my confidence in government is at an all-time low. I don't have a lot of confidence in the scientists, the people that made all these different models that predicted everything they predicted. So I struggle with that side, but I think I was allowing myself to run with that without doing something about it, which is praying. So prayer actually does accomplish something.
Yeah.
And it occurred to me that while I have kind of let myself stew about the government and been, you know, every time I hear, you know, the word governor, I have this I just start twitching like, oh, great. You know, it doesn't matter if the last name is Newsom or Whitmer or whoever else in the US, I hear governor and I'm like, oh, great. But what I hadn't done is respond to that with prayer. So we really need to pray for whether it's our local government, our state government, our federal government. God tells us to pray specifically so that we can lead a peaceful and quiet life, godly and dignified in every way. And there's a variety of ways that I do feel like our inability to gather as a church, whether it's on a Sunday or during the week, it is going to lead us away from peaceful and quiet lives that are godly and dignified. Like we need to be together. That is a genuine need. So I ought to ask for prayer that I ought to pray that God would give our leaders wisdom and even overrule if there is just like the sinful worldly ways of thinking are causing us to not be together. I want those to be brought to an end. At the same time, God gives us government as a good for us, right? And so the government is intended to bear the sword, not in vain, but it's intended to be a threat to the evil, not to the good. So I want to pray that our government be good and that it make good choices instead of just kind of fretting. So yeah, we can actually pray and it will change things in Sacramento or Capitol Hill or whatever else. Otherwise, why would God tell us to waste our time praying, right? So anyway, I'm just saying I need to pray more and be frustrated with Governor Newsom less. So
yeah, it's a fine line though, isn't it, David? You could watch so much of something and it festers in you. Yeah. I'm going to be preaching on Sunday. I'm just going to take our body just one step further from the shield of faith as he finishes the components of the armor of God. It's praying at all times in the Spirit with all prayer and supplication to the end. Keep alert with all perseverance. And we just need to be in prayer to keep that ourselves in tune between being aware but not being overwhelmed, or we can lose our joy.
Yeah.
Fine.
I'll just maybe a color commentary. I called someone in our church this week just to see how they were doing. Yeah. And I asked, how can we pray? And her response was, well, I just want to pray for our president. I want to pray for our leaders. And that was like, it was, she wasn't asking for prayers right away for her own family, but just a reminder. Yeah, we want to pray for those, that are governing. So it's a good reminder.
It's amazing what this time is doing to all of us, like all of our households, all the people that we know. I mean, it's really stripping out so many things that we fill our time and our lives with. And like I was talking with Owen and I we've been throwing the baseball out in front of our house, and Owen's like, man, I miss baseball. And it allowed us to have a conversation about the fact that but baseball isn't life. Yeah. And my job is not life. And what I do for fun is not life. It's not these aren't the things that define us. They can be blessings in our lives, but it really has kind of, in a lot of ways, stripped a lot of our lives down to the fact that honoring the Lord and loving people is life. And that's what we are called to do. We're called to love God and to love people. And so it's hard to find joy in the fact that those things, the things that were normal blessings in our lives are kind of ruined in a way. And yet to flip it, I think with whether it's we're talking with one another or with our kids to go, hey, but guess what? Don't you see now more than ever that life isn't about you having fun with your friends? I mean, that's a great blessing.
But while we're on, will you put the Dodger Stadium?
Yeah. Hold on
just one time.
I know. I thought about.
Put your hat on.
I got a better background. Hold on.
Okay. He'll be back, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
Shay, we're going to go back to you live in the main studio.
This just in, we lost. Wait, he's coming. Oh, no, he's got the shield of faith.
All right. Sorry. Okay. So anyway,
here's the shield of faith.
Okay.
There it is.
So when I put on my shield of faith,
yes,
to battle those arrows,
yes,
right, of unhappiness and doubt, life isn't about. It's not about the stuff that really takes place of God when it comes to our happiness. I mean, we are called to find our joy in the Lord and in loving people. Yeah. And it's hard, and it's good to be honest about with that with one another. But I just I agree. We got to find joy.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, well, hey, we've got a few more minutes. So I want to, as I've been saying, land the plane or begin to land the plane, start our initial descent at least. But just trying to get some, you like that initial descent? Come on.
I just.
What? What did I do?
People texting. People texting me right now, and somebody just texted me, baseball is life.
That's why I wanted that Dodger Stadium background, Blake,
Got some shepherding work to do, Blake.
Yeah, it's true. There you go.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Live from Dodger Stadium. Now I've lost my total train of thought. I was
You're landing the
The
plane.
plane.
was starting our initial descent and we hit some turbulence there. I don't know.
Shay, like hardly anyone's flying planes right now. I just want you to know that.
Exactly. That's true.
But a lot of people on bicycles.
That
So
is
those have become super popular. Okay. No, practically some practical help. Hold on. The president has a word.
Oh, we're in the White House.
Yeah, I thought we were gonna get an announcement. Okay, practical stuff. Bible verses, books, music, web apps, Zoom things. I can give a shout out right away for a class or a thing happening tonight in just an hour and a half at 7 p.m. We have our ladies beginning a little bit of a study, a kind of a reading together of this book. Watch this. Look at this. Look at this production value. Oh yeah. Check this out.
Ooh,
Shay?
Zoom.
Is it Gospel Primer or the Gospel Primer?
No, Primer. Yes, Primer. Gospel Primer by Milton Vincent.
Good book.
Little gospel meditations. Again, I said this on Sunday, but you can read these in like 2 minutes. The women are going to okay. Sorry, I just looked out the window here of the church building and there's people riding bikes and they're just texting and riding bikes. I don't think that's safe. Let's stay safe out there, people. But no, Gospel Primer tonight at 7 p.m. Information's available on our website. The ladies are getting together, Women of Grace. They're going to do a live Zoom meeting just like this, but it won't be recorded. It won't be actually live streamed. You have to actually log into that using Zoom. So, but you can contact Kristen Harvey for that. But that's one practical help. Just to meditate on the gospel together. But guys, what else? What are things? I've got a few more, but I don't want to take our time. I got to make sure these bicyclists are going to be okay.
Okay.
Hey, I want to say two things. One, I realize maybe we've hit the saturation point or more in like online options of things that you can do. But I still am teaching every Wednesday night. I'd love to have you. Maybe you haven't come to any of those. Just pop in this weekend and see what it's like. So that information is also available. Is not, I think some people have called it a counseling class. I mean, there's certainly some counseling principles, but it's not a class for counseling. It's really for us applying God's wisdom to life. We're going to be doing some special things moving forward. I'm going to be bringing some guests into that class to hit some other topics as well. So anyway, love to have you on Wednesday night if that works for you. And then Secret Church is coming up on Friday. We have more people signed up for Secret Church than for any other Secret Church we've ever had. And I mean, I would just tell you, I'm excited about Secret Church, especially because of the topic about God, government, and the gospel. I genuinely have wrestled with, I think my heart's going to need to hear some of the stuff that Platt has to say because of my frustration with our government and trying to manage my personal frustration while trying to pastor well. And it's just been a difficult thing for me to juggle because of just the irritation or the frustration I felt with our government. And so I'm looking forward to even that time adjusting some of my perspective. So more of you have signed up than ever before, but there's still room. You can sign up even late into the week because we can provide you all the notes in a PDF. So it's like 118 page book that you get. And it has blanks you can fill in. But so anyway, love to see you at Secret Church if that's doable for you on Friday.
Demo, did I hear today? It's like over 90 people from our church have signed up already.
Yeah, I think we're at 95 right now. So
let's go. That's awesome.
Yep.
Sweet time. Very cool. Hey, I've got one. This is, I brought this up, just a resource for families, and especially since there's a lot of screen time right now. But I brought this up today in our communications meeting as a staff, and someone I think suggested that I bring it up here, and I will. And it's an add-on to your browser. So if you have kids that are using, a laptop or something to do school and other things, there's a little add-on that's called Distraction Free YouTube. You can look it up. I think it's available for like Google Chrome browser or Safari. Distraction Free YouTube. And what it does, if your kids like mine have to be on YouTube or like look up videos for certain things for school right now as we're all online, it actually removes all the suggested videos from the page that you're viewing a video on. And so I personally have this installed on my computer. And when I need to look at a video, there's obviously a lot of great content on YouTube. It's not so much about that, but it's about being able to get rid of all that junk, I think, that kind of appears. And so it really just hides that. And I have found it extremely helpful. And so I just throw that your way, parents, distraction-free YouTube, or sometimes it's abbreviated DF YouTube. Look that up. And I think that will be a help to you with yourself using your computer and also your kids. So
Can I ask a question on that, Shay?
yeah.
If you're using an app, is there any way to do something similar, or is it only if you're using YouTube through a web browser?
No, the only thing I know of as far as mobile devices that I'm aware of right now would be something like Circle that you'd have to pay for, that you attach to your router. Yeah, we could talk about that too. But yeah, Circle is a great option, but I haven't found a ton of great stuff for mobile. You could look, but yeah, if I find something, I'll let you guys know. Yeah, it's a good one. Oh, and I also brought this book too, since we were talking about family worship. Just because Demo, I didn't want
Definite Demo clapping over there.
it.
Blake,
All right.
Shay, that's a good book, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'd give maybe just three little things, I guess, for your own family or for your own life. First is a little yellow book that we just started using with the kids as part of our nighttime routine called My First Book of Questions. And it is a little bit of a catechism, but not a super scary or intimidating one. Even our 2-year-old James is getting it down. So first question, James and Addie, who made you? And they say God. And second question, why did God make you? And we do little hand actions to glorify him and enjoy him forever. And what else did God make? He made all things. And so basically a way for us to begin teaching, brainwashing, teaching, what's the difference, right?
Hey.
Good theology to our kids. Second resource, when you read a good book and it just kind of sticks with you, I feel like it kind of sticks to my heart and you're going to take it a long time. I just finished the book, Evangelism and the Sovereignty of God by J.I. Packer, and it was phenomenal. Yeah. I think almost every line in there, especially in chapters 3 and 4, resonated with me and really just got me fired up again about evangelism and loving people through evangelism. He talks about how you're ministering to the most important part of someone, their most intimate and centerpiece, their soul. And so handling that delicately and yet also being bold. And then the third thing I'd say is that I'm actually being forced to pray by a class that I'm entering into. Pastor Scott's going to be teaching it, and it's making us pray for 3 different segments throughout the day. And it's just been super good. And for me personally, I have to set a timer. And throughout my life, when I've had my most disciplined times of prayer, it's been when I've set a timer, and it can sound a little bit rigid, but honestly, just the discipline of sitting there for 10 or 15 or even 20 minutes, it is so good. And so I would even say if you've got time, if you're at the house, maybe even a family prayer time where you break out for, even if it's 5 minutes to start, just being disciplined in our prayer time has been super fruitful for my wife and I.
Mm-hmm.
It's cool. Okay. Any other resources? Because I want one more thing, and we got to finish up here. We've gone a couple minutes over of our hour allotted time. Okay. Well, hey, we did. Some of you may have seen this. I think we posted it to some of the social media channels, but we got some prayer requests from the Ortega family in El Fuerte, down in Mexico. And actually just saw on the news today, we were talking about the news earlier, but Mexico has entered kind of another phase of the coronavirus. But I wanted to read these prayer requests, and you were just talking about prayer, Matt. Here's some specific things from one of our missionaries from our church that we can be praying for. They wrote this: pray that in the face of this pandemic, God will calm our fears and show himself as a powerful savior in the municipality of El Fuerte. And he has Zephaniah 3:17 listed there. And then secondly, pray that our church, of course, that's a church in Mexico, will learn that Christ is sufficient in our lives in these difficult times. If we have him, we have everything. And he has Habakkuk 3:17 and 18. That's sweet. We want to pray for that. And then finally, the third thing, pray that our members are willing to speak the word of God and that God provides opportunities for them to do so. Colossians 4, 3 and 4, he lists there. So those are some really practical things that we can be praying for. Matt, you can be praying for those in your 3 times a day, right? And obviously the body of Christ, and we want to do that. So we're going to try to continue to put those kinds of things together. Obviously you can watch the things that we're producing. There's you're interacting with people in Zoom and you can find prayer requests. But man, what an opportunity if God has allowed you to have extra time for us to come to him in prayer, right? And just entreat him. And so, man, and I would say this, you guys, we were at an elders meeting this past week on Zoom, and we just had the majority of our time over Zoom was in prayer. And man, I mean, that was a sweet time with our men, just begging him, for mercy and talking about who he is. And so I know that you guys were blessed by that as I was. But man, it's an opportunity for us to pray.
Yeah. And Shay, maybe I'll take a moment and make a shameless plug.
Yeah.
Grace Groups is something that I'm kind of stepping into and going to be helping facilitate and give leadership to. And so if you're not in a Grace Group, I think this is a great time to get into one. All of those groups can be found on our website. And I think the majority of those groups are meeting to pray, even through a Zoom platform. And so
Cool.
Great way to join in on that, and great time to do so.
Okay. Hey, and if you guys have any questions about what's going on in the life of our church, all of it, of course, available on our website, graceofthevalley.org. And would love for you to get involved however you can. And guys, thanks for a good conversation today. It was fun. And we'll catch you next week. All right.
Bye, Shay.
See you guys.
Bye, everybody else.
See ya. All right.